TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah podcast.
Gargoyles, psychics, everything's ungodly. Dark's at it.
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian.
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark's at it stuff.
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm your host, TruthSeekah. This is the TruthSeekah podcast. Excited and delighted, as always, to be with you guys for another amazing episode. We're going to cover all things spiritual. It's what we do. We're going to keep doing it. And today's guest is going to bring you guys a lot of stories and a lot of beautiful connection with his work and the things that he's seen. So it's going to be really good. Make sure you guys buckle up. Stay tuned. I want to say a huge shout out and thank you for watching this live and being a part of the community in the chat, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, no matter where you are, man. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you have any questions and comments, be sure to put those in the chat there, and I'll get them over to Lionel a little bit later in the show. And also want to say a huge thank you to everybody listening to this on the podcasting apps after it airs on the podcast, man. You guys rock, and thank you for co-creating with me. Everybody who's supporting this work financially, everybody who's partnered with me on Patreon to keep doing this thing, you guys mean the world. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, everyone who's come on. You guys mean the world. Want to give a plug really quick about our event coming up on March the 25th, which is with Miss D. Wallace. I'll go ahead and play that commercial really quick. Check it out.
Join D. Wallace and TruthSeekah for this exclusive online webinar. Tap deep into trance state and experience bliss beyond your wildest. Learn to communicate with your higher self. Gain clarity for your life's purpose.
Hi, this is Dee Wallace. I hope you join us on March 25th for a discussion on energy and manifestation and create what you want. So sign up now.
Register now. MysticCircle.net.
All right, you heard it. That's it. March the 25th, we'll be having Miss D. Wallace on. She was the mother from E.T., and she played in Cujo and Critters and a bunch of other really cool 80s and 90s horror films, and she was the scream queen of the 80s and 90s, and she is an amazing healer. She is really intuitive and works with pendulums, and it knows how to give beautiful words and connecting with your energy. So she's going to be doing a workshop for us with this webinar. Everybody who is members of the Mystic Circle, you guys get access to that, but there's also standalone tickets as well. So go check it out. There's a bunch of really cool stuff available right now. All my guided meditations and a bunch of other stuff that I'm working with other creators on themysticcircle.net. We're also working on documentaries and putting together some presentations that are going to be there as well. So make sure you check it out. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's discussion. Today, my guest is Lionel Friedberg. Lionel, welcome to the TruthSeekah podcast, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Derek, thank you. Nice to be with you. Nice to be with you and your community. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining. Looking at your bio and your line of work, and some people have one experience that is kind of their staple, one individual, one near death experience or whatever it is, and that's their staple. That's their one thing, and they sell it, they package it, and can do courses and books and speaking on it. But you've had a bunch. You've met amazing people and had crazy experiences, and I want to get into a bunch of them and unpack them with you, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I guess before we get into all that, just kind of give a quick overview, who you are, your work, what you bring to the table. We'll start there with just a quick background.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you can see, I'm a sort of old dude. I'm in my late 70s now, and I've been in the film industry all my life. I've been making documentaries and feature movies and all kinds of things. And I've had an extraordinary, I don't want to sound boastful about it or arrogant in any way at all, but I've had an amazing life. And I've experienced the most extraordinary things. And what I've learned over the 60 years that I've been making movies and writing is that the world we live in is a weirder and stranger and more amazing place than we can even begin to imagine. Now, I'm not coming to this, from the aspect of horror movies or anything like that. I'm talking about really hard science documentaries and material based on evidential material. And I have seen, and it's as clear as a bell, that this world offers the most incredible opportunities to delve into other realms and take your mindset to a completely new level of thinking but about the entire universe. And it comes from the films that I've made and the people I've met, whether, as you've mentioned, a couple of them, things like near-death experiences. I've met a number of people, including children, by the way. And that's what's so extraordinary, not just adults. These are kids, and their experiences were all very similar. That's what makes it so extraordinary. But it's on. And I've worked with ethnographic films with National Geographic and on television networks around the world in tribal areas. And I'm not talking about only doing things, hard science in the cities, but being out in the boondocks, meeting people who live in rural areas as far away from anywhere as you can get. And even there, coming across the most extraordinary things. So it's been amazing. And, if we can jump in wherever you want. The reason why I wrote my book, Forever in My Veins, is that I just felt, and again, I don't want to sound arrogant about this, but I felt that it would be unfair of me to not share these experiences with the world, with readers who want to find out more, who want to expand their vision a little bit. I think in terms of cinematographic terms, putting on a wide angle lens, putting on the widest lens you can possibly get and seeing the universe in the widest, most embracing perspective possible, and putting it all and bringing it all into your field of vision, and of course, the old term, thinking outside of the box, because I've been there. It's just been amazing.
A good place to start with something not near and dear to my heart is the UFO phenomena. And you've taken pictures and have sightings and talked to people and one of the biggest ones that coming from Africa and children, you mentioned children, is the experience that happened where a UFO came down in a field by a school in Africa, and these crazy stories where all of these children are attesting to seeing the same thing. And these little kids don't have no reason to lie and make it up. And they're drawing pictures of the beings who came out of the ships, and we hear these crazy stories. And then you catch something like that on film. What do you think is going on? What are some of your experiences? Let's dive into that.
The incident that you're talking about is a really, really interesting one. And this happened in what is now the country called Zimbabwe. I think when this incident happened, I think it was originally called Rhodesia, the country, but I think that this incident happened when it was already called Zimbabwe. And I actually met one of those kids. She's now a young lady. She was a kid when this happened, and I met her at a at a UFO conference, as a matter of fact, in Arizona. And I talked to her, and this kid was just absolutely extraordinary. And she told me, you know, that when she went out, all of these kids, this is a very exclusive school out in the boondocks, and wealthy families would send their kids to the school. It had a great academic background and all the rest of it. And one day, this object landed in the bush around just next to the school. And I'm talking in Zimbabwe, the bush felt it's thick, heavy trees, kind of like not a dense jungle, so that you could sort of easily get to this thing. And they all saw this object land. And I asked her, well, what did you think when you saw this? And she said, well, we all went crazy, all the kids. So we all tried to get out of the grounds of the school to go and find this object. And she said, I was with a friend of mine, and we went looking around the trees, and it was easy enough to get around there. And she said, suddenly I discovered this being. And obviously what she was describing was a gray, a couple of grays, just standing in front of her. And she said, we were mesmerized. I couldn't move, she told me. And she said that this individual stared at her, and she felt as though it was looking right through her. And then she said that she felt as though she was a recipient, as though it was downloading data from itself to her. And she had no idea what this was all about, but they were riveted. And she said it was only weeks or months after that, as they were processing what had happened to them, of course, they were fearful, but more intrigued than frightened, because they all got these images from these creatures. And all the other kids said the same things. The other kids who encountered these beings, they were either little grays or tall whites, maybe, which are the most typical of the aliens that are seen by most folks. And she said the data that we got was like a kind of a warning, a program of information to us about the fact that we are not treating our planet correctly, and we need to get our act straight. We need to start treating our world better. Otherwise, we're in deep trouble. And, she told me that years and years later, all of these kids, as they grew up and as they became adults, they all started drawing images and pictures. Now, they were finished with the school, they'd grown up, they'd started their lives. And she said, we all started drawing these images. And these images were like of the environment, of, trees and forests and rivers and stuff. And basically, clearly, what was really happening was it was a warning. Now, you'd think that, an incident like that ideally should happen on the mall in Washington, D.C., or, in the middle in Times Square. So that if this data or this information or this warning that these creatures were bringing to these kids, should be given to adults. But, we are hostile beings, and we are dangerous. And these beings, whoever they are and wherever they may be coming from, are aware of the fact. Because what's the first thing we do? We pull out a gun, we pull out a rifle, we see them as a threat. Whereas kids like that are not. And maybe that's why they encountered them there. But let me tell you about an interesting event that happened to me in 1966. I grew up in South Africa. As you can hear, I've got a funny accent. I grew up in South Africa. And I grew up during the middle of the apartheid era, where that country was strictly divided straight down the middle, by very, very strict racist laws. And it wasn't a choice of people. It was the law of the land. There was separate everything for everybody. And it was a very, very difficult situation. And it was only when Nelson Mandela was finally released from prison, and when the walls of apartheid came tumbling down, that, South Africa became a democratic society. But I grew up there when I was a kid. Apartheid was alive and well in all its ugliness. And I had seen many, many instances of, basic, just racist incidents. For example, if a black person didn't have a permission to be in a certain area, boom, they'd straight to prison, and that's it. And they were sent back to their tribal homeland. because the government there, the white government, created all these artificial so-called independent, what they called Bantustans or homelands for all these various tribal groups. And if you did not have permission to be in a white area, a big city like Johannesburg or Cape Town or any one of the other big major cities in South Africa, you would be sent back to your tribal homeland. And, I'd seen this as a kid. So, my father was an immigrant to South Africa. He originally came from Latvia in Northern Europe. And when he had arrived in South Africa, married my mother, she was a South African. I was an only child. And my father was really upset about this whole racist system there, the apartheid system. And in 1960, he decided to leave the country. He decided to, he learned his trade as a watchmaker in the good old days where people had, mechanical watches, so his job was to fix little springs and cogs and wheels and stuff like that, in this little micro world. That's what he did. And so he took a job as a watchmaker in a jewelry store way up in the north, way beyond South Africa, right on the border of what was then the Belgian Congo. And the Belgians had just given up their holding on that territory and given Congo its independence. But of course, a civil war broke out almost immediately. And that poor country has been suffering from a war ever since. But we won't go into that story. But right next to that was a British territory called Northern Rhodesia. And now this was the end of the colonial era. Britain was giving away all its colonies around the world, in not only in Africa, but elsewhere as well, islands in the Pacific and, And so it was decided that this country of this area called Northern Rhodesia, which was basically owned by Britain, by England, was eventually going to become independent. And, so things looked promising. And my father said to my mom, look, I saw an ad for a job in this little jewelry store up there. Let's go. Let's see what conditions are like up there. Now we're talking about the very, very heart of Africa, Central Africa. And I had just finished my high school. And when that happened, I said to my folks, I want to go with you guys. And my mother said, forget about it. You're going to go to university or college. You're going to get yourself a degree and get yourself a life. But, I had fallen in love with the movies when I was a kid. And so from the age of 11 onwards, I was making movies for my school, sporting events, birthday parties, all that kind of stuff. So I was movie crazy. And I followed them up there because I thought, wow, what a wonderful opportunity. I can make movies about darkest Africa. I'd seen all these amazing movies at the local bug house down the road, Tarzan, the African Queen, films of that ilk. I don't even know if folks are aware of these titles, but they were amazing adventure stories. And that's what I wanted to do. So I followed them. And eventually I had to leave that territory because it did become independent. And so I had started working for a television station up there. And then I didn't know what to do. So I had no choice but to go back to South Africa, stayed there for a while, worked in the film industry, and eventually emigrated. And I emigrated to Canada. So the year is 1966. It's taken me a long while to get to the story, but now I'm in Canada. And I'm working on a documentary for the National Film Board about the development of housing around Canada, how urban areas begin, what makes them start, and how they spread. Is it oil? Is it shale? Is it agriculture? Whatever it is. So we were in the province of Saskatchewan. It was a small crew, just 3 of us. And we had a film at a potash plant. Now, most people don't know what potash is. I didn't, and to this day, I'm still not particularly sure what it is. But you get the stuff out of the ground, and they use it to make fertilizer. It's a white rock. They crush it, and you get this sort of powdery material, and you use it in fertilizer. So we went to go and shoot at this potash plant because this potash plant was the genesis, the beginning, the catalyst that started the beginning of a new town, and that's why we were there. And Saskatchewan is as flat as a tabletop, just cornfields, flat as can be. So we stayed in a little motel, at some very, very tiny town, but it was in the middle of nowhere, in order to go and film at this potash plant. And in the morning that we were due to go and film there, we get up in the morning. We start driving towards the potash plant, and you could see the plant about 30, 40 miles away, because I said the ground is absolutely flat, no mountains, no valleys, nothing. And you could see this dust cloud going up into the sky. Anyway, we eventually get to the potash plant. And when we get to the main gate, the guy there says to us, "Hey, you fellas, get down to the parking lot down at the works, because in the dust cloud that's sitting above us here, there's something in there. We don't know what it is." So the director, I wasn't directing, I was a junior member of the camera crew. And the director said, like, what are you talking about? What is it? And the guy said, "We don't know, but it looks like there's something metal sitting up in the cloud." What? He said, "Yeah, get down there. Maybe you can see it. We've seen it this morning. The first thing when we all arrived for work, you could see this thing." Anyway, we drive down to the plant and parked. The director goes and meets the general manager of the plant. And I set up the camera in the parking lot next to, those are the days of station wagons. So we had a station wagon. I set up the camera and I put on a very long lens and looked at this cloud. And a couple of the guys who were working at the plant, they came out to me and they said, yeah, there's definitely something up there. I said, "Did any of you see it yet?" And the guy said, "Yeah, you'll see it. If any wind comes up or the breeze comes up and the cloud moves away, you'll see it up there." So, I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, I had this camera set up, looking at this dust cloud sitting up above us. And a little breeze did come up and suddenly flashed like that, a glint of metal, something metallic. And I thought, oh my God, there is something up there. And then the air started to move a little bit as the morning moved on. I'm talking about like a half an hour later. And this dust cloud dissipated and revealed this huge circular object, clearly metallic, just sitting there. How high was it? I have no idea, but people have often asked me, how big was it? Now, this was before the days of jumbo jets and 747s and stuff like that, but that was the size of this thing. A big round disc, no sound, no method of propulsion, no windows, no nothing. And underneath it, there was like a sort of triangle, metallic triangle connected to the disc. That's what it was, just sitting there in the sky. I would say maybe half a mile up high. And I thought, I ran film on it, started running film. Those are the days of film. No video, no digital, you run film. And we were running 16 millimeter film. And I ran about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 minutes worth of film on this thing. And then the dust slowly covered up this object again. And that was it. Then we had to start filming at the plant, because that's what we were there for. And the director came out, the guys from the plant, and so that's the rest of the day was spent filming at the plant. But the director said to me, cut that roll of film that you shot this morning, whatever it is that you photographed, and put it in a separate can. And when we send it back to the lab, because everything had to be processed before you could watch it, it's your good old fashioned days of film. Just make a note on there that we don't know what this is. Please keep for our return, because we were still going to be on the road for some weeks. Well, when the documentary was finished, we all eventually ended up back in Montreal, which is where the National Film Board has its main offices. And comes the day for us to look at all the dailies, all the stuff that we'd shot out in the western provinces of Canada. And there were a bunch of people in the audience. There was the head of the camera department. There were people from a government department, the Department of Housing, and the crew, us. And so we sat through miles and miles and hours of boring material of little towns developing, and graders making roads and stuff like that. And at the end of it all, the projectionist yells out from the back of the theater. He says, "What about this other roll here that says hold for arrival? It's got no markings on it. It doesn't tell me what it is. You want me to project that too?" And I said, "Yeah." I said to the director, "Yeah, well, that's the thing that we shot in the clouds." "Oh yeah, put that on." So we ran the film. And everybody was stunned, because there it was, as large as life on the screen, this huge, big, certainly an artificial object. I wouldn't say man-made, but I would say, whatever it wasn't natural. And it was impressive because of its size. And the silence of this thing, just sitting there, not budging, not moving. So we look at this thing, and eventually the head of the camera department says, we have no idea what that is. Does anybody in this room have any idea what that is? None of us did, of course. And so he said, down in the US, the Air Force down there are running a project called Project Blue Book, that any UFOs that are seen or photographed, you should send our material to them. And maybe they can identify it. Let's send this stuff down to those guys. Maybe they can tell us what this was. So anyway, it was all packaged up, and the lady who worked for the head of the camera department, she sent it via a courier service. This is long before the days of FedEx or UPS or anything like that. And she sent it down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, in Ohio, which is where Project Blue Book was based. And we forgot about it, Now, I have to tell all your viewers there were two different kinds of film stock those days that you could use. You could either use a negative, like was used for feature films, and that's your master. That stays in the lab. You never use that. You make a copy of that, and the copy is a positive print which you can project and use for other purposes. But your master, the negative, always remains sealed in the vaults, right? But there was another kind of film stock that the Eastman Kodak Company made called reversal. So when you process that, what you get is a positive image. You could run the same piece of film that you used in the camera without having to make a print, because it was already a print once it came out of the lab. And people used to use that stock to take still pictures for slides. And it was used for the kind of 16 millimeter film that we were using at that time, because it was highly reliable, and the colors were vivid and wonderful stuff. So I'm only telling folks this because here's the problem. What we did was we sent the original. We didn't send a copy because we didn't need to make a copy. So we sent the original down to Wright-Patterson and forgot about it. And, I worked on another documentary, and one day I came back to the camera department this is in Montreal, and I said to the lady who ran the place, Frankie Johnson was her name. I said, Frankie, did we ever hear from those people down at Project Blue Book about that film that we sent them? And she said, oh, no, I'll give them a call in the morning. This is like late in the afternoon. Next day, she calls me into her office. She said, I have something really interesting to tell you. I said, what? She said, when I called them, they denied ever having received the material. I said, you're kidding me. She said, yeah, but they signed, and there it is. And she holds up this little document. They signed the documents. We know that they've got it. And now they are denying that they have it because they said to me, what film? Well, I was always interested in UFOs, and I was always interested in the idea of basically a denial that they existed. And this was proof of the pudding. This was the proof that I really needed. I'd been reading about UFOs since the first book about UFOs came out. I was a kid. I'd been reading that stuff since I was young. And here was evidence that myself I had about the fact that, oh, there's a cover-up going on. Why? Well, eventually Project Blue Book was disbanded, and I have no idea what happened to all of that material. 90% of it was explained away, weather balloons, this, that, the other. But a lot of the stuff was never identified. And I know for a fact that craft that we photographed was not identified. They could not tell what that was. That was an extraterrestrial object. Now, I'm going to fast forward a bit. And in the 90s, I worked on a series called Ancient Mysteries for, I think, the channel was A&E, if I remember correctly. It was either A&E or the History Channel. And before the days of Ancient Aliens, we did a documentary. It was called Early Encounters, or the title was something weird like that. Leonard Nimoy was the host of the show, the series, and one of the shows was this Alien Encounters or something like that. I wrote and directed the show, and we took the story way back to ancient times. And I'm even on some Egyptian tomb walls, there are images of round flying objects in the sky. But of course, we now know that artwork and tapestries and paintings, even during the medieval and the Middle Ages of Europe, depict flying objects like that in the sky.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, there's stories of the Vimanas from the Mahabharata that you see on the temple walls of Angkor Wat, and I've seen them myself, you know, flying objects in the sky. I've met Jacques Vallée, I've met Stanton Friedman, I've met all the top guys in the UFO world. And this is a reality. And so, you know, there is absolutely no question that these things exist. So I was very happy to work on this show, this Ancient Encounter show. And I had found out that Gordon Cooper, who was one of the original Mercury astronauts for NASA, that he had seen a UFO many, many years ago when he was stationed in Germany with the US Air Force. And I thought, wow, you know, I got to get hold of the guy and see if he would give us an interview. Now, there was also always rumors that all the astronauts who worked for NASA had to sign a secrecy document, that they were not allowed to speak about any of this stuff. Don't talk to the press. Don't tell anyone if you do see anything on any of the NASA programs, whether it's Mercury or Gemini or Apollo. They had to sign a secrecy document. You know. But apparently Gordon Cooper had broken silence, and I wanted to find this guy. And it turned out that he had an office right here in LA, here in the Valley, which is, I'm talking about the San Fernando Valley. There's a huge commercial private airport called Van Nuys, and he had an office there. I tracked the guy down and I went to see him. And I said to him, he was probably in his 70s at the time, or maybe even 80s. And I said to him, Colonel, I'm doing the show and we'd like to interview you because I hear that you had actually seen a UFO when you were a younger guy. He said, oh, sure, you know. Now, there's a movie called The Right Stuff. Dennis Quaid plays Gordon Cooper in that movie. It's a remarkable film. And that was in my mind when I met him, you know, because I love The Right Stuff and I love all the space stuff. Anyway, I said to him, would you agree to do an interview about this object that apparently you had seen as a young guy? And he said, yes. And I said, are you the only one who's ever seen anything like that? He said, we've all seen them, but we all had to sign a document telling us, you know, that we are sworn to secrecy. We wouldn't talk to the press. We wouldn't talk to anybody. I have broke ranks with that because I thought it was ridiculous to keep this cover up going. Sure, I'll tell you whatever you want to know on camera. So we got him in the studio, Gordon Cooper, and he tells us when he was based at I think it was Ramstein Air Force Base, it's a US base in Germany in the 60s. He was flying F-86 Sabre jets at the time. This is before he was chosen to join the NASA program. And he said one day they were scrambled, two of them. And he said they were told that there was an object up in the sky, you know, about what the height was, maybe 30, 40,000 feet, that was just hovering there. And we need to go and identify it, see what it was, get some images of it. So he and another pilot took off in their F-86s, and they went to where this object was, and they saw it on their radars. And there, as they approached it, they could see that it was this huge round disc. And he said, the minute we approached this thing, it just took off at thousands of miles an hour. Kaplam! He said, nothing that we had could even come close to what that thing was doing, the way it was behaving in the sky. It would shoot off at like 1,000 miles an hour and stop, and then zigzag like this. We couldn't catch up with this damn thing. We got images of it, and we have no idea what it was, but they exist. And in fact, the words he used is, they're here. They really are here. That's for a fact. And then I'll tell you something else of interest to do with the whole, and we did the show, and that interview is in the show. And if I'm correct, I think you can see it on YouTube. I think it's called Ancient Encounters. But anyway, also during the 90s, one day I was out at Mojave Airport here in the Mojave Desert, just north of LA, because there was a series called about the history of flight. And the presenter of the series was Neil Armstrong, who was the first guy to walk on the moon. And a friend of mine who was a test pilot for the Skunk Works at Lockheed, he said, "Come on out. I'd like you to let's. I'm working with Neil Armstrong on the show. Come on out and meet the guy." So I did, and I went out there, and Armstrong was the host of the show. And what they were doing was they were actually flying a 1950s era British fighter jet as a demonstration of early jet fighters. And during the lunch break, I said to Neil Armstrong, the crew broke and this truck arrived with lunch. And I said to him, "Colonel, do you mind if I have lunch with you?" And Armstrong said, "Sure, absolutely." So it was as hot as Hades out there in the desert. And I said to him, "Let's go and sit in the camera truck and have our lunch there. It's a little bit cooler. I'll turn on the air conditioning." And he said, "That's great." So I was sitting behind the driver's seat in the front cab of the truck, the camera truck, and he was sitting on my right. And I thought, I'm going to ask this guy if the rumors that I had heard about he and Buzz Aldrin seeing something when they were on Apollo 11 on that mission, that they had seen something on the moon and on the way to the moon. And I said to him, "Colonel, do you mind if I ask you a question?" And he kind of immediately, I could see him tighten up, He was a very, very private guy. And he said, yeah, what do you want to know? And I said, those rumors about you and Colonel Aldrin having experienced something weird on the moon, something alien. He wouldn't even let me finish my question because he knew what I was going to ask him. And he just took his plate. It was a paper plate because it was a lunch with throwaway paper plates, plastic knife and fork. He just put it on the dashboard and he looked at me and he said, "You did not ask me that question, and I am not going to answer it." Now, this is from the first man to walk on the moon. And an answer like that, for me, was more like an admission that he had more to say, but he wasn't going to say anything more about it. These things exist, we know that. And, just to take the whole UFO situation a little further along the line, people have been saying that maybe the time is now coming, where we are going to be told the truth, that this is the year of disclosure. Well, I'd like that to be the truth, because what about that incident recently off the coast of San Diego, where those Navy pilots were doing an exercise from the USS Nimitz and photographed those objects flying above the Pacific Ocean and doing the weirdest things? It made headline news. It was on all the main news networks. So who knows? Maybe this is the year of disclosure. But these things are here. And I think it's time that we are going to be told. And it's not only about here. The Russians have got huge files of information about this stuff. And no doubt the Chinese as well. So who knows? Maybe this is the year that we're going to be told the truth. But we know that they exist. Mm-hmm. There's no question of that.
What do you think that they are? Because they were here when we were primitive, before we had technology, and and I know you're interested in the gods theory and the Sumerian text and those things. Our gods, our creators are, but that kind of puts a spin that we're like worker bees or servants or something like that, versus a intimate relationship with these entities, like the children had, this hope of, hey, here's how you take care of your planet, here's how you do this, you guys got to get on the right path, and having these downloads and stuff like that. And tied into the Bible as well. If in primitive time and this would happen, you would say it was an angel, you would say it was a god, especially if it was something positive. There were other times in ancient texts where they came to destroy things and judge the wicked and things like that, and so it was kind of a negative situation. But what do you think that they are? Everybody has, because you have a lot of know-it-alls who would tell you, well, that's the Palladians who've been watching over us. And
I'm quite sure that a lot of your viewers have read Zecharia Sitchin and that whole series of books about the Anunnaki, and I interviewed Zecharia Sitchin for a show. he wasn't a very good interview because, you know, his native language is not English. It was Russian. And his interview, unfortunately, was not usable. But anyway, I met the guy, and I heard him speak many, many times. And I think Zachariah Sitchin is onto something. You know, for a long, long time, once we unraveled the genetic code and the human genome had been decoded, you know, the scientists were saying that there's a lot of DNA that they were referring to as junk DNA. We don't know what those particular parts of the DNA chain do. It's just like, what's their purpose? And they were referring to it as junk DNA. Well, we now know that it's not junk DNA. And my theory is, and a lot of other people believe, I'm not original in this thought at all. A lot of people think that this is not junk DNA. This is probably alien DNA. I think that we have been genetically modified. I think that we were genetically tweaked a long, long time ago. And I think that the whole idea of, you know, Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, about an alien intelligence coming down to this planet millions of years ago, not yesterday or thousands of years, but millions of years ago, and influencing us in some way or another is true. Now, for what purpose, I don't know. Zachariah Sitchin says that we were engineered to be slaves, to work in gold mines. And here's an interesting thing. South Africa, as most people know, is one of the world's biggest gold producers in the world. They are, you know, there are gold mines all over the place. And there's an area of South Africa where gold mines have been found that go back 40, 50,000 years. These are deep shafts, and they've been digging gold there 40, 50,000 years ago. Who did that? And why? And what was the gold for? Zachariah Sitchin says, well, these were drones that were created by manipulating and using human DNA as well, in order to mine gold for the Anunnaki to use on their planet, because their planet was losing its atmosphere, and you seed the atmosphere with gold dust, and you can preserve your atmosphere. That was his theory. There's a guy called Michael Tellinger, who I also know, who's discovered all these ruins all over South Africa, and there are millions of them. And he said, this is probably tied in with Zachariah Sitchin's Abzu theory, that Abzu were where the gold mines were, and that's where the human DNA tweaking took place. You know, we don't know for a fact if any of this is true, if Zachariah Sitchin is true, if Michael Tellinger is true, and it doesn't matter. But I do think what is important is that we are not entirely of this earth. I think that we have been genetically modified somehow or another, because we don't even know what these DNA strands do. Why would they be there? Nature does not make mistakes. It doesn't. It does things for a purpose. Mm-hmm. The whole structure of nature, if you study Darwinism and evolution, whatever else, things don't happen by mistake. They all have function and purpose and roles to play in the environment and in the ecosystem of environments and planets and whatever else. I have no doubt about that. So, yeah, how come we're carrying all this dead DNA that does nothing? It's not nothing. It's probably alien DNA. These are the leftovers, and we haven't been able to understand it yet. And I'm probably sticking my neck out by saying that, you know, we probably do have alien DNA in our DNA strands, in all of our cells. And I think that the time will come where we will probably be able to identify where and when the stuff comes from. I do think that we've had encounters, and these encounters go back a long, 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 long way. I've asked people, by the way, out in tribal areas many times, and I've done a lot of ethnographic films in rural areas, you know, scientific documentaries about rural lifestyle and tribal societies. And I've often said to them, do you ever see, you know, weird stuff at night? Have you ever seen, you know, things land? And one of the most ancient groups of people are called the San Bushmen, S-A-N. They live in areas of Botswana and Namibia in Southern Africa. And they're nomadic people. They move from place to place. They still live very much like a Stone Age culture. Those people say, yeah, of course, we see things like that. And they were once asked, well, what are they? And they said, oh, don't worry about them. those are the people from the other worlds. They come here all the time. So their traditions go back a long, long way and have these these stories about these encounters with these alien beings. So, this has been going on for a long, long time. The Aborigines of Australia have similar stories, as do many tribal areas in South America,
And maybe this is too, easy of a question. Maybe it's speculating, but benevolent or malevolent, good, bad, evil. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people are afraid of the unknown. I'll say that. But they they look at where I would say that these were, angelic, something beautiful. I've had encounters in that telepathic communication. Like, I've had those experiences and changed my life. Beautiful. A lot of people are scared. Those are demons. They want to take you off planet and abduct you and, run experiments on you, because that's what we would do to them. If we caught one, in somebody's house, or a ship was down, we're going to tie them to a table, run experiments on them. And people say that that's what they're doing to us. What is your belief as far as a code of conduct, or good or bad, or whatever in space, if you will?
Well, thanks to Hollywood, most of them are portrayed as being very malignant and very, very evil and very dangerous and, scary beings. Always, whether it's The Day the Earth Stood Still, a classic sci-fi movie. What is the first thing we do when a UFO lands? The first thing is we bring out the Marines, we bring out the tanks, we bring out the big guns. We are the hostile beings, not necessarily them.
Yeah.
I think we are the dangerous ones, not them. But I'll tell you this, that having talked to a lot of folks around the world about this many, many times, I think there are multiple species of beings that are visiting us. There's not just one or two or three. I think there are probably a couple of dozen or more. I've heard as many as 54 different species from different parts of either this galaxy or other galaxies in our neck of the woods of space. And space, we can't even begin to imagine how big space is. The cosmos is. It's just so huge that it's beyond our capacity to even imagine it. And I knew Carl Sagan, and I did a show with Carl Sagan, and he said, I cannot even hold in my head the idea of how vast the cosmos is. Now, to think that we're alone is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, absolutely ridiculous. There must be millions and millions and millions of species out there who are way ahead of us technologically. So I think there are multiple species over here. They're not necessarily all bad, and they're not necessarily all good. We probably have both. And I think, the time will come where one day we may well find out. But at the moment, it's still too much speculation. There may well be people, and there may be military types and governments who know more than we know. I mean, what do we know? I've tried to ask what goes on in Area 51, and I hear that in Utah there's an underground facility where they've got alien spacecraft, and they're trying to reverse engineer it. And all this may well be true. I don't doubt any of this for a moment. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But I don't think they're all benevolent. But when you hear stories about a lot of folks who are saying that, nuclear missile, these intercontinental missile silos, where UFOs have often gone over them and have actually what's the word? Stopped them from operating. Cut the power. I think that there are some who are trying to prevent us from blowing ourselves to smithereens. And some of them are definitely trying to keep us on track. And some of them are definitely trying to help us preserve our world, like those children in Zimbabwe who were given this message about be kind to your environment, be kind to your world. There no doubt are many, many of those, but who knows? There may be others as well. Do we have proof of that? I don't. Some folks may. But I think that the case applies to both. We have all types visiting us, and why not? We would do that. The Spaniards, when they went to South America, what did they do? They enslaved everybody, and yet there were others who went there who went exploring and didn't do that. So I think the same is happening here on the earth.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about film, like your love for film and telling a story with all of the aspects of the audio as far as, sharing a dialogue, sharing imagery, and then music as well. How does that help to tell a story, even like with, YouTube being really big and anyone can download, Adobe Premiere, Sony Vegas, and kind of put their own little presentations together, and they add the music, they add narration, and I'm working on some stuff as well. But as far as getting a message across, even if it's not true, whether it was trying to create a narrative and sell it to someone, and that music kicks in, that being your background, what does it do for us when we're stimulated on all those areas?
I think there are two sides to that story. And one is that it's possible today for anybody to become a filmmaker. Anyone. All you need is that. You need an iPhone, right? That's all you need. In my day, or an Android, right? Yeah. In my day, you needed a movie camera that was almost as big as a refrigerator, that ran film, and you needed a crew of 10 people to move it around and operate it and power it and all that kind of stuff. Today, anyone can become a filmmaker, and all you need is a phone and a laptop, and you can make a movie. So that is a very wonderful advance of technology. And I think the kind of thing like what you're doing right now, communicating to folks and creating a community for people to interchange ideas and explore things together is absolutely vital. And I think it's fantastic. We've never had opportunities like this, like we have now. It is so exciting. And I mean, I have seen some amateur films that are made by folks on their phone and edited on their computers and put together amazing little movies. And, the kind of stuff that you see coming out of countries where there's civil war and things like that, whether it's Syria or Myanmar or wherever you want to go, now we can have access to all that stuff, and people can tell us and show us what's going on in their communities and in their world. We've never had that before. It's amazing. And I think these social media sites are just something phenomenal. The other side of the story is that because it is so easy now and so simple to be able to do that, there's a lot of junk coming out as well. There's a lot of noise coming out at the same time. And I think that the lack of the discipline that I had to undergo when I had my career, that's gone out of the window. So we need a little more structuring, and not everybody can afford to go to some of the good film schools like USC Film School here in LA or UCLA, the great film schools in this country. Of course, there are many others as well at colleges throughout the US. Some of them are fantastic, absolutely amazing. And but it's not as simple as one thinks. And the fact that it's easy to do is a good thing, but at the same time, there's a lot of really appalling stuff coming out, and there's a lot of junk coming out, and there's a lot of material coming out that people buy into in terms of social messages and documentaries that are not exactly accurate or truthful. And a lot of people buy into the stuff because the internet is now available to everybody. All you need is Wi-Fi. All you need is a battery, and you need a laptop. And you have access to the stuff. In the days gone by, it wasn't like that at all. So there are two elements to this. But I think it's the most exciting time in the world for communicating and for imparting ideas and for crisscrossing points of view and looking at the world in which we live. We've never had this opportunity like we have now. And it is fabulous that we can do that.
Yeah. What are some of the key ingredients that someone may miss out on trying to put together a documentary or a film or tell a story? Again, I mentioned having, narration, whether it's interviews in there or imagery, B-roll, showing pictures of what you're talking about, having that music in there to kind of set the mood and set the tone, and then having a story. Is there something that really makes for a good documentary where it ends on an up note, it ends on a question, or do you have to bring something home at the end, or is there anything that's left out of the mix for people who are amateur, like YouTubers, or putting together their own documentaries?
Well, I can only speak for myself and give you, my philosophy, and that is no matter how dark the subject that you're dealing with, no matter how depressing it may be, whether it's to do with the way we treat each other, the way we treat our environment, the way we treat our world, whatever it may be, I have always believed, no matter how dark and down the subject may be, at the end of the film, there should always be a message of hope. Don't end on a down note.
Yeah.
Give folks something to cling to. Give them something to hope for. Give them something to overcome. Give them something to aspire to, and not to drown, in the misery of so much of the stuff that's going on in the world today. And all we have to do is to just look at the way we're treating our environment, and our fellow beings. The way, for example, we treat each other as human beings, but also the way we treat our fellow beings on this planet. For example, factory farming and mass agriculture, industrialized agriculture, I think it is absolutely appalling, the cruelty and the horrors and the terrors, and it's kept away from everybody. So I'm delighted that there are folks who are able to go into some of these places and expose some of these horrors that go on and tell the world about it, because otherwise people would never know about that.
Yeah.
But there's always got to be a reason to give folks something at the end, an up note of some kind to aspire to hope for, to learn about, and not end on a down note, because there's no point in being depressing about it. We've always got to be hopeful.
Awesome. Good. How much more time you got? How much time we got together?
Oh, as much as you want,
Okay. Wanted to ask you, change the subjects, talking a little bit about shamans and healers and your experience in that realm. I know you've had some experiences and have some belief and have seen some things.
I've had amazing experiences. Let me tell you something, Derek. When my folks moved up to that territory that I mentioned earlier, northern Rhodesia, Zambia, when my dad took that job and I went up to Central Africa and started working in the television station, it was the end of colonialism. Britain, as I said, was giving away all its colonies. Everything was becoming independent. We're talking about the early 60s now. And so colonialism was crumbling around the world. And I was part of that. And so what happened was, when I was working for the station, one day when this territory did become independent, it was taken over by a black government and not ruled from London anymore. We all got pink slips, everybody at the station. Now the station was basically owned by, the money came from England, and I think some of it was from South Africa, and most of the folks who worked there came from Europe, from England and from other parts of Europe, the key people in the station. And there were only about 30-40 of us who worked at the station. It was a tiny place. But we did sterling work. We did a lot of wonderful stuff. We did educational broadcasts. We did all sorts of things. It was incredible. And one day when Northern Rhodesia became independent and became the Republic of Zambia under a black government, we all got fired because the government nationalized the station. They took it over. And it became state-owned and controlled, and started to be run by the government and not a private enterprise anymore. And so all the white folk who worked there were told to leave. And they said to us, thanks very much, you've done a great job, but bye-bye, we don't need you anymore. Your job's got to go to local people, which is fine. We all understood that, and we all agreed with that principle and that philosophy. But the problem was, most of the folks, the key people, could go back to England and go back to where they came from originally. But what was I going to do? And I really was at a loss. I did not know what my future would be. So we had a very, very nice young guy who worked for us as what they used to call, in those horrible colonial days, a houseboy. Basically he mowed the lawn, cleaned the dishes, helped in the kitchen, stuff like that. He wasn't much older than me. And he was a terrific guy, and his aspiration, his dream was to have his own photography business as a wedding photographer. That's what he really wanted to do. And one particular year, we gave him a Christmas present of a camera, and he, that changed his life. And so he and I had a lot in common, and we'd often go out, he and I, into the boondocks to little African villages to go and photograph the local lifestyle. He and I. So he and I were really good buddies. And but when I was fired, as were the rest of the white staff from the television station, I told him that. And he said, "Oh no, what are you going to do now?" And I said, Well, I don't know, David, because I don't know what else I can do here. There's not much for me to do here. I may have to go back to South Africa, which I don't want to do. And the primary reason for that was because of apartheid. Apartheid was still in existence at that time. South Africa had a good film industry and a thriving one. But, I didn't fancy the idea of going back to South Africa. So I said to him, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm only, how old was I? Like 20, 21, 20, 22. And he thought for a moment and he said, let me see if I can find someone who can help you. So I said, like who? And he said, leave it to me. A couple of days later, he comes in, he says, okay, I got someone. Thursday afternoon, we're going to go into the bush. We're going to meet someone. I said, we're going to go where? And we're going to do what? He said, yeah, I found someone who can help you with, decide what to do with your life. Now, I had no idea what he was talking about. So comes this particular day, and there we are in my little beat-up old VW Beetle, traveling on this dirt road, way out into the boondocks, outside of a city called Ndola in Zambia. We went to a little tribal village, and on the end of it was a single hut, all on its own. And he said, that's the place. Go and park the car there. This is where she lives. I said, who? He says, you'll see. And so we parked outside the hut. He goes and he knocks on the door, and this ancient little woman who spoke absolutely no English at all, and who probably spent her entire life in this little village, she opened the door of our little house and she asked us inside. I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what David had arranged. I had no idea who this woman was. I had no idea what I was doing there. And she brought us into this single room. There were maybe only 2 rooms in this little house of hers. And on the floor, there was very little furniture. But on the floor was the grass mat. And on the grass mat was a little bag, a little animal skin bag. And around the walls of this room were shelves, and on the shelves were a lot of really weird things in containers and objects that looked like bulbs and herbs and berries and leaves and grasses and ground up stuff and powders. I had no idea what any of this was, but clearly it looked as though she was some kind of a shaman or another, Anyway, she spoke, the language was Bemba. That was her ethnic group, her ethnic identity. So she spoke no English at all, but David interpreted everything for me. And she said, sit down. We did that. We sat at this grass mat. And then she told David to tell me, I've got to pick up this little bag. It was, a small bag, a little container. And as I shook it, I could hear there were like clinking sounds, And she said, open the bag, blow into it, say your name, which I did. And then she took some snuff. Now, snuff is ground up tobacco leaves so that they sniff, it's like, it gives you a little bit of a high. It's kind of like they all use that stuff in the tribal areas. And she said, sprinkle some of this because that is your token gift to your ancestors. Because your ancestors are going to help you find your way. And I thought, my God, what is she talking about? I have no idea. And then she turned the bag upside down and sprinkled onto this grass mat a whole bunch of bones and pebbles and little stones and other little trinkets. Now, the bones came from specific animals: crocodile, hyena, lion, goat, a particular antelope, plus some others, and they were all small. They were not big. They were like, the small chicken bone size things. Now, the paradigm for these shamans in the African context is that the ancestors speak to the shaman. And how do they speak to the shaman? They use bones, and the way these bones and stones and things fall, whatever pattern they make, is interpreted by the shaman because the ancestors are helping them understand what the bones are telling them.
Clairomancy.
I guess that's the technical term for it, yeah. And the idea is that my ancestors have influenced the way the bones have fallen on the mat. And her ancestors are the ones who are helping her to interpret what these bones mean. So this little old lady, she leans forward like this, and she says, and she suddenly grabs her eyes and she goes, ah, as though she got blinded by a very bright light. And she says to David, she says, oh, I can't see anything. His work, it's all these bright lights, I can't see anything. When I heard her say that, I thought, oh my God, you better pay attention to what this little old lady has to say, because what she was seeing clearly were the lights in the television studio. When she said his work, I cannot see past the lights, these bright lights. That's what she was seeing. I immediately felt that that's what she was seeing in these bones. And I thought, you better listen to what she has to say. And you know what? For an hour, all she did was she was blurting out, saying things to David. And he was trying desperately to keep up with her, translating everything into English for me as to what she was saying. Do you know that just about everything that that woman told me that day came true over the next 60 years? And I'm talking about specific things. My marriages, how many kids I would have, how many grandchildren I would have. And then she spoke in riddles. She was seeing visions that I don't even think she understood. Like, for example, she said to David, and this is what I was waiting to hear, because I needed advice as what I'm going to do with my life. So one of the things she says to David is, oh, you tell him not to worry. He's going to cross the big water. And he's going to go into that direction. And she points towards the north. I thought, okay, fine, whatever that means. I don't know what to make of that, but okay. What else does she say? And then she said to David, she said, and one day in his work, he's going to go, when he goes to that place in the far away in the north, there will be more lights, and he will meet and work with many very famous people. She said to him, one day his work will take him to a place, to a world. She uses the word world, where there is no color. It's only white. A white world where there is no color, just white. I had no idea what she was talking about. She says to David, one day he will meet a man who knew the most evil man who ever lived in his work. I thought, what on earth is she talking about? So, I kind of filed all these little statements of hers and predictions away. I had notepads and that, but I kept it all in my mind. And it's only as they came to pass that they made sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, for example, this business about crossing the big water and going to the north. Well, I did have to leave Zambia. I had to go back to South Africa to work in the film industry because there wasn't anything else for me to do. And I worked there for like a year and a half. And then I decided to emigrate, and I emigrated to Canada. That's because I got a visa to go to Canada pretty easily. It wasn't easy to get a visa to come to the States those days because of apartheid. So halfway along the voyage, now you take a ship. You didn't fly those days. We're talking about 1966 here. Most people who went abroad went by sea, particularly if you had a lot of baggage. You wouldn't fly by commercial jet line. You went by sea. There were ships everywhere. And not cruise liners. These were passenger ships who were going from one place to another. And that's how I traveled. I went from Cape Town to England by sea, and that was a 2-week journey, 2-week voyage. And halfway through that voyage, one night, I went up on top of the deck of the ship, and every night I used to look at the sky. I used to look at the stars. I'm a stargazer, and I watch the sky every opportunity I get. And every night that I would go up there, I could see that the sky was changing. And I was becoming aware of the fact that I was actually moving from one hemisphere, the south, towards the north, because the sky was changing every night. And I was aware of the fact that I was crossing the earth. I was actually moving from one part of the earth to another. Not only that, but I was traveling by sea on the Atlantic Ocean, which is a huge ocean. And that is what that woman meant. He will go to the north on the big water. That's what I was doing. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, this woman could actually foresee the fact that I was going to emigrate by ocean, by sea, to the Northern Hemisphere. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And all those other things that she predicted, like, for example, the white world. In the mid-90s, I did a show for PBS together with the National Academy of Sciences here in Washington, D.C. on Antarctica to to go and take a look at the environment of the Antarctic, to look at the ozone hole. Is the ozone hole getting bigger? Can you detect the presence of increasing global warming gases in the atmosphere in the Antarctic? Is the ecosystem being affected by human activity? But of course, there are no people down there. So if you want to test the health of Mother Earth, you go to a place where there aren't any humans. But the impact of humanity on a place like that is very, very profound because of what we're shoving up into the atmosphere, what we're putting into the ocean, and all of that stuff. So we went down there as it was a scientific research trip, and it was Christmas Eve, 1990. And the captain was a Norwegian crew on this. It was a icebreaker research ship filled with American scientists and our film crew. And it was Christmas Eve, and he decided to stop the ship that night. We have a party. He said, we're going to celebrate Christmas tonight. We're going to stop the vessel, and we're going to party tonight. So we did. Now we are so far south, and in the south in December, there's the sun never sets. It's perpetual daylight, And so around about midnight, I decided to go up on deck. I'd had a little bit too much to drink. I'd been, partying downstairs with everybody else. And I decided to go up on the deck to keep my notes up to date. And I went to sit on the deck of the ship. The ship was painted white, but the hull was red. And other than that, there was no color anywhere to be seen at all. Everything was white. The sea was covered by pack ice. It was covered in ice. And the only way you could move forward was to actually break the ice, and then move forward that way. So it was ice from horizon to horizon. And then the sky was like white, like this white glare. And I tried to describe in my notebook to myself the world as it looked in order for me to write the narration later on. And what I wrote was, this is a world without color. It is a world that is totally white. And it suddenly hit me. Oh my God, that woman. She told me I would go to a world where there is no color. It's only white. She foresaw that trip that I made to the Antarctic decades before it happened.
Wow.
And then, for example, that other thing about I will meet a man who knew the most evil man who ever lived. I made a film on the history of an airline, and I actually met Adolf Hitler's personal pilot when he was in his late 80s. I spent an entire day with the guy in Germany, and he showed me all his photograph albums about him and Adolf Hitler. And the reason why I met him is because he delivered a brand new airplane in 1934 from the factory in Germany to South Africa. And that's why we interviewed the guy. And, he and Adolf Hitler were really, really close. So he was a Nazi, but he wasn't responsible for any war crimes. So he was never, convicted of that. But I spent an entire day with the guy, and his photograph albums were full of images of him and Hitler and Goering and all those people who ran the Third Reich. And it was only at the end of the day that we were driving away from this interview that I suddenly realized, my God, do you realize that you talk about 6 degrees of separation? That was 1 degree of separation from the most evil tyrant who's a mass murderer responsible for the death of millions of people. And I've just spent a day with the guy, She foresaw that as well. So these people, these shamans have the capacity to foresee things and to foretell things and to predict the future, but they also have the capacity to diagnose illnesses. I came down with a very, very serious kidney disease in the early 90s. And I was told that within 10 years, I'd either be dead or I would have to undergo dialysis. And I sought help with African shamans. I went back to Africa to go and consult them because I knew that maybe there was another way for me to heal myself. And I did. I've survived this. And my nephrologist always, you and your witch doctors, he'd say, I said, yeah. Well, I've been around and I've had this illness now for over 30 years. And he doesn't understand it, my nephrologist. And eventually, when I wrote this book and he read my story, he said, I always thought you were talking a lot of BS when you were telling me about the stuff that these shamans that you were going to see in Africa. But now I have a different understanding. You've given me a new understanding that there is not only the Western way of healing, the allopathic way as it's known, but there are alternative ways. Well, of course there are. Ask the Aborigines in Australia. Ask the people in the Amazon rainforest. Ask the folks in Peru. Go and talk to these people who live in the middle of nowhere in the jungle in Africa. They know stuff that we in the West, with all of our institutions and our universities and our academic structures, we know nothing about, but they do, you know. So there's so much more to learn and know, and these shamans are incredible. They can teach us so much. What is the takeaway lesson of all of this? Well, there's more to the world and to life and to the universe than we know, or that we are taught at school, or that our Western society believes in. That's for sure.
There's more to explore, and you know, even talking about disclosures, like waiting for somebody to tell you, or waiting for somebody to give you the go ahead. And you can explore this stuff by yourself, man. You can stargaze. If you keep looking up, you're bound to see something. I believe it. And so I know you go into these stories and a bunch more in your new book, Forever in My Veins, how film led me to the mysterious world of the African shaman. Where's the best place for people to go to check this out, check out more of your work, and to follow you?
Well, they can go to my website. It's Lionel Friedberg, LionelFriedberg, LionelFriedberg.com. That's my website. They can read excerpts from the book there. They can see some of my other books there. And they can also go to my social media sites where they can listen to interviews like the one I'm doing with you now. And they can also go directly to places where they can buy the book. The book is available from Amazon, from Barnes & Noble, and it's also in one's local bookstore for those bookstores that are open. And by the way, I am all for supporting local privately owned bookstores. If folks want to, buy a book, rather buy it from your local bookstore. But if it's not available, it's very easily available on Amazon.com, and it's called Forever in My Veins. And it only came out in January, and it's available all over the world. And I think anybody who reads it the takeaway lesson of that will just expand their horizon so much that every single one of us is capable of so much more than we think we are capable of doing and being and becoming. It expands your horizon. Think outside the box, and be aware of the fact that anything is possible, and we are capable of doing whatever we set our minds to do.
It's awesome. Lionel, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed this talk, brother. And we have to do it again. Thanks so much.
I'd love to, Derek. And you take care of yourself. And thanks for having me on.
For sure. We'll do it again. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Lionel Friedman, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you check out his book, check out his work. Man, just a love for film and documentaries and books. And so for somebody like that who has had a bunch of experiences, right? You go out and you have these experiences. How do you share them with the world? How do you articulate it? And you do it through film. You do it through interviews. You do it through writing books. You do it through making music, putting it in a poem, a song, or whatever. So tapping into the arts to articulate, your experiences with whatever it may be. And so in his case, a supernatural, shamanism, UFOs, aliens. I mean, this stuff's right up my alley, and I really enjoy doing this work and inspiring people, because I do find it really interesting that some people, have, they live life and they've never had any experiences like that. Maybe they have, they just haven't reconciled it, but it's, and to them, they haven't touched the divine. They haven't seen anything. And then somebody like myself, like Lionel, like many other people can go and have many, many, many experiences with UFOs, shamans, energy, and the list goes on and on. He's got a book that's just dedicated to these stories. And I've interviewed people who have story after story after story. Myself, I have story after story after story. I don't know that I would, if I met me and, I don't know if I would believe me. It's like, hold on. You've seen fairies and aliens. You've seen this and that. You can do what? It's kind of hard to trust people just off of their word, because when it comes back to having some type of proof, it's kind of slippery. It's kind of slippery in those realms, and sometimes it's hard to bring stuff back. Repeatability is iffy. I think we are keying in on that, that repeatability, talking about the dormant DNA that we have, that our DNA has been tampered with and altered. And for what? How do we use it? Well, when we're looking at the, talking about the UFOs and the alien beings, or we call them angelic beings, they're doing, like, there's stories of them walking through walls, stories of them levitating, stories of them communicating telepathically, these beings, these entities. Jesus was doing very similar things as well. Maybe that is what the dormant part of our DNA, or even our brain, that we only use a small percentage of our brain, maybe the other half allows us to tap into how to get the brain in a meditative state in order to communicate with someone telepathically, to try it, to do it. I think there's a lot more when it comes to ESP, extrasensory perception, that we already have access to, that we've forgotten about. It's not like we're learning to do it. We forgot about it, and it's about relearning, a revival of the arcane ways that used to be normal. And looking at, spiritual teachers and spiritual leaders and miracle workers and things like that, I believe we have access to that, to tap into energy, to be able to send, push, and pull energy, to be able to communicate with the ancestral spirits, to be able to communicate with the angels, with the demons, even the beings that are in your auric field, to be able to even tell what is in your auric field, how to tap into what we would just call the third eye, to be able to discern spirits around people. Like, you have to, everybody can do this. You may have to train yourself. You may have to learn how to use that. For me, I very much believe that that's what that dormant part of our DNA is. These beings are coming in. They're communicating with you telepathically. You're receiving them. There's ways that we can do that. Then there's people who have trained themselves. And the lady I talked to the other day, in Russia, they had a college where they taught people. Like, the whole college was for the magical arts that they're still doing. It's like something on Skyrim. You sign up for the School of the Magical Arts. I forgot the name of it. These, mystery schools, if you will. But they're still doing it. And a lot of this stuff has been forgotten to us. And we are reawakening. We are relearning. And it's coming out. It's been coming out through movie, through film. And we see what is possible, even if it's just through a character that somebody made up, but it resonates deep down within us when we see these, like, supernatural and special abilities and healing and leaving your body and breath work, doing breath work, breathing techniques that make you more sensitive to this atmosphere as well. Doing breath work techniques to enter into deep states of trance where you go in and you commune with God, with the Holy Spirit. Receive messages, inspiration, speak to yourself, prophesy, learning the power of your voice that you can talk to yourself. Connor says the College of Winterhold. I believe so, brother. I believe so. I tell you what, when I played that game, when I was starting to have my awakening, and I joined that college, and all of the symbolism and all of the tasks and things that you did were like right on par when it comes to like hiding that spirituality within video games. People know this stuff, and again, they put it in the art. We'll just pass it off as another video game, or it's just a game that somebody made up. No, that, like, there's literal, like, real magic in that stuff. There's ancient stuff that we forgot about. And Angelus here in the chat, she says, "Are remembering." We remember, and it's little things that trigger your remembrance. A movie, a song, in my case, writing songs and music and presentations, and it triggers something. Wow, there's something deeper. I had a similar experience. Let me explore it a little bit more, so definitely remembering and looking at art, how we can hide this stuff and sprinkle it in art. And they've been doing it. That's what allegory is anyway. That if I was to sit down and tell you some of these things, you wouldn't believe me. But if we hide it in the stories, then once you get it, the parable, even how Jesus taught through a parable, most people couldn't get it. But those who begin to question within themselves, what is the deeper meaning? What is he trying to say? I know he's not talking about literal seeds falling among rocks and getting and not taking root. This story is not about seeds. This story is a deeper meaning about my spiritual walk and about consciousness and expanding and growing closer to God. And so like, we sprinkle that stuff here a little, there a little, in everything that you do. It just comes out of you. So praise God for the arts. Praise God for these video games. And, we're talking about Skyrim, and then you got, you just name it. There's so many. I remember playing a Sega game for the Sega about the seals of Solomon and Solomon's ring. And you got to get the Solomon ring to have, like, where do they get that stuff from? You think they made it up? No, this is an ancient text. This is what the ancient world believed, going back to the Renaissance art in UFOs. I love it. There's pictures of Jesus on the cross, right? These paintings, Jesus on the cross, in these little spaceships in the background. These people driving these little chariots of fire, driving them in the background. I think it's a picture of the Virgin Mary and Christ, I believe it is. And there's somebody on a rock in the background, real small. You got to look at it, and he's pointing up in the air, pointing at a UFO. Renaissance art. They believed in this stuff, man. A lot of it is continuing to come out through the art, the painting. And let me hide this Easter egg in it. It's hidden things within it. The stuff that you're going to see at face value. And then that's like your initiation. Do you believe it? Do you go deeper? Do you want more? Okay, what's the next one? Oh, wow, there's more? These movies, again, like, Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and like Lord of the Rings, and the allegory, and these people represent, biblical characters even, or they represent parts of your psyche, or maybe both. Like the writer who meticulously wrote this has made this have several different meanings depending on what type of person you are and where you are when you read this or you're introduced to the work. I think the Bible is written that way. The ancient mystics believed that there were at least 4 ways to break down the Bible. Some people would say more, but there was 4 ways: the allegorical and esoteric, the literal, and the spiritual. And it means different things. You got the face value surface stuff that many would miss the deeper spiritual truth. And you have other people who can get the really deeper spiritual truth, but you're reading something else because someone else is interpreting it very literal. And it's the same thing with the movies and when it pulls you in because it's speaking again to something that resides deep down within you. Listen, that's the power of film, the power of art, storytelling, pictures, imagery, creating documentaries. We're working on some documentaries. I'm really excited about it. It's a lot of work, but we're hiring, again, professional voice actors. We're shooting great footage. I'm having people travel here, and we're setting up full days of filming, and we're really putting some time and energy in this stuff on the background so that we can present something that inspires you, that answers more questions that are deeper within you. And so the way to really get this stuff, because we're talking about it, it's cool, we're having a long form conversation, Discord, but whenever you put it in art, man, it just does something else. It may be a song, and you may be listening to this song or watching a movie over and over, and you don't get it the first time. Again, you hear people talking about reading the scriptures. They don't get it the first time. It has to be illuminated to you. It has to speak to something deep down within you. And a lot of times you going through something in your life opens you up so that the next time you read it, you're like, wow, I know what that scripture has a lot more meaning to me today than it did 6 years ago, because of what I went through, because of what I experienced. And now I have a deeper insight because I read another book outside of the Bible that went into a lot of detail about this stuff, what it means, casting lots, claromancy, where he's talking about the bones and all that kind of stuff, and receiving visions and stuff. This is a practice they did in the ancient world, even in biblical times, casting of lots, and so you like, the more research, the more you live life, you're able to get, more knowledge on how to interpret this stuff. And it means something different to you each time that you approach it. Listen, these same conversations that encourage and enlighten and, motivate people when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to the realms of the unknown, to God, to Christ, and all of these things, which it does for me. for other people, where they are in their life, what they've learned, what they've been taught, what their preacher said, what their parents said, movies that they've watched. So when we talk about this stuff, they get triggered. It's all evil. It is all demonic. Stay away from it. Don't listen to this podcast. Be careful. Aliens are demons and they want to kidnap you. And if all spirits are demons masquerading as angels, and they're not, there's only demons. Like, people have different backgrounds and preconceived notions and bias when they approach any of this stuff. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's the really interesting thing. And so to the pure, all things are pure. So that's what it is about for me. It's about, motivation, and hopefully those people who approach it and were scared of this kind of stuff at first, maybe they become more open to it. Maybe they watch a documentary. Maybe they something else triggers them, and then they come back later and say, wow, I get it. And I get those messages all the time about this content and what we're bringing to the table and stuff. And they may hear an interview like this, and they think aliens are demons. They think that whatever, but then they keep listening to, maybe the end of the podcast, and then they're like, oh wow, when you said that, everything kind of joined together. Or I seen a different podcast, a different talk that you did, and now everything makes more sense, and I get why you're doing this. I get why you talk to these people about their experiences. I see it. At first I was scared, I'm not gonna lie, I had to turn it off. Listen, trust me, I get these emails, and I love these people. I love the ones who keep coming. They keep coming back. They didn't just get scared and leave. Maybe they did for a week, but it was something that was like, listen, there's something there that I'm drawn to, whether it's the freedom, whether it's the expectancy, or whatever it may be, that this stuff is real. Whatever you want to be is real. It shows itself to you if you can believe it. Even if you're the only one believing it, it becomes your reality, your truth. And so the possibilities of that are endless, especially when we have real world implication and we're helping people, encouraging people, equipping people. That's where it's at for me. And that's why I continue these talks. That's why I continue to put myself out there. Again, when I first started doing this, it was with my community in the religious realm and stuff like that. It was, I was a laughing stock. They laughed at me. They made fun, and, UFOs and aliens and demons. And trust me, we got made fun of now. And now, this is what I do. And people want me to come to their churches and speak. People want to have me on their podcast and get me on their songs and all this stuff. And so this, it's a process of that truth goes through. First, it's ridiculed. First, it's made fun of. It's persecuted. But you got to stand strong for whatever it is that you believe in, especially when it has to do with something that is meaningful, of truth, justice, equality, love. Come on, man. That's what it's about. Standing up for love. And if you can reach one person with your life, with your story, it goes a long way. And that other person will reach somebody, and they'll reach somebody. And now, we have children of the TruthSeekah podcast. There's people who have started their podcast because they say, well, he can do it, I can do it. And let me own my story. I've been quiet about my experiences. If TruthSeekah can do it, I can do it. Let me try. And so listen, man, you being vulnerable and putting yourself, that's how we change the world. Each one, reach one, and together we'll change the world. 51% would say yes to that beauty, to that love. Oh man, shout out to everybody hanging out with us in the chat. Flying Penguins, Martin, see you, brother. Seen your post too. I'm gonna share it. Yeah, the doom and gloom, book of Revelation. Soon come. Now is, these key words, brother. I see you, what you're doing, man. Love it. So we're gonna be doing some more stuff. Again, there's another podcast that we're about to start, and it'll probably air on my channel, but it'll be branded under something else. But we're gonna be doing the Mystic Circle here soon, and it'll be a round table with probably 4 people or so, rolling ideas and questions and bringing stuff to the table. So it's gonna be fun. So we can have a couple people in the community be a part of that, and probably in a ever evolving cast, or revolving cast, where it changes every week. Maybe I won't be there, maybe other people will be there, but it's something that I want to do and want to facilitate. And there's looking for those people. So if you want to be a part of that, the Mystic Circle podcast anyway, hit me up. Go to themysticcircle.net and send us a message there and show us what you got to bring to the table and have a stimulating conversation. So it's going to be good. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. Love you guys. We'll do it again very soon. Be sure to join us for our breath work on Sunday mornings. You get access to that by being a member of the Mystic Circle. You get access to our prayer and discussion and prophesying mystical prayer, which we do on Thursday nights. We'll be doing that tonight. And so you get access by being a patron, but also everything is starting to slowly but surely move over to the Mystic Circle. You have access to so much more. It is so much more interactive with the platform there and what we're building and putting over there, and being able to find stuff too. That was a big one with like Patron, which I'm still on it, but trying to find the meditations, trying to find the documentaries, trying to find, the events and all that, everything just like in one long stream. But now we have everything just in posts and tags, and you click on meditations, there they are. We're archiving the past prayer sessions, the Sunday morning breath work, and those kind of things. If you haven't been a part of that, you can go back and watch the episodes that you've missed or the sessions that you missed, and I'll tell you what, they've been really good. And so to start off, your week with going in deep through trance state, through breath, and connecting with the Father. It's connecting with the Spirit, connecting with everything that the Lord has for you. It's been beautiful. And Christocentric breath work, connecting with the eternal Creator through the breath, connecting with Christ through the breath. So I love it. We need to do it, keep doing it. And so check out the archives. They're there, themysticcircle.net. Bunch of stuff coming up. Love you guys. We'll do it again very soon. I'm gonna say peace. Love y'all. Peace.
Your way so much higher than mine, so much higher than mine, so much deeper than mine, so much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.